Hi, this is a walkthrough of a blog post which should be going up very shortly. And one of the reasons for the walkthrough is to help the person better understand the process by simply visually seeing it so they can replicate it. People come to the site with a whole variety of skills, both technically and biologically, as in how much science they understand, and expectations. So with that much said, let's get into it. First, here is a draft of the post. Epstein-Barr, which is typically can be a precursor to chronic fatigue syndrome. Tick bite, which generally shifts somebody over into chronic Lyme issue. Bunch of things, and then ended up with a diagnosis eventually, checked several times, of MS. So this is an MS case with possible overtones of Lyme and chronic fatigue syndrome. So, bit of fun. Now, looking at the usual thing, we actually have no strong pattern coming out. In fact, technically, person, although is sick, doesn't appear to have the degree of dysfunction which is typically seen with most people using my site. Okay, now let's go over and we have the profile, and when we go into changing biome site, we have a complete list of things here. Chronic Lyme was one possibility, but we see we have absolutely no matches. Another possibility was MS, and there we have a good 14 there, etc. So let's go through and build suggestions first, and then look at suggestion. The blog post does a very brief, quick version. So first thing is, we go back to my profile, and we hit just give me suggestions. What this does is uses 4 different ways of selecting which bacteria to modify. The bacteria we modify determines what we suggest you take. And by doing 4 different ways, we get around the problem that we really don't know the right way of doing things. And the fact that we have so many different variety of people and conditions and diets and everything else, there is very unlikely to be a right way of doing things. So what we do is we do 4 reasonably good methods to get suggestions as a baseline, and then we can add more on top of it to emphasize a specific conditions or a specific concern. So it's basically what's called a consensus approach, or some people could call it a Monte Carlo simulation, by doing 4, 5, 6 random ways, not quite random, but reasoned ways of doing things, and then seeing what the average result is. Very much like climate change forecasts. Tons of different people come up with different things, and then they average it, and you get an idea of what's going on. So I just click the magic button, and we wait a few seconds. So now we have that. We have the ability to immediately do a PDF file, and I did a PDF file and extracted that from the file thing, but we're not done that. We want to go back, and we want to take a look at some other things. We want to go back here, and we had MS being a choice. So there, and now we go to the bottom, and we are going to just do everything, and we're doing further down. So we just going to do everything. And now we have our suggestions, which is specific for that particular combination. And now we go back and we do ME without IBS. We have 4 out of 25, which doesn't seem much, but in terms of the patterns, 95% of people have less matches for these 4 particular bacteria shifts. So we're going to add that to our do one. Again, toss up everything. And there, and now actually if we go back to changing microbiome, we see we have 6 packages there. And now we're going to hop over to a last one, which is clicking on the health indicators, which goes down and gives you all sorts of information, which I do. But what I'm basically interested in is this one. What we're going to do is we're just going to go and click all of these. This is a pretty good sized list. But then again, from the description of her, she has a fair amount of health issues. So we just go to click all of those. Add check to handpicked bacteria. And there we go. We click get suggestions. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make sure, because we are working with the consensus, we want to toss everything in because the everything tosses everything in. And high, low, okay. And that's basically it. So now we just click here. And now we have, there we have the 16 bacteria we're trying to modify, and we'll go back to here. We now see, let's do a refresh. Sometimes that lags. Okay, let's just take a look here. We have actually 7 things done, and now we have things ordered by number 7, and you can see we have a whole bunch of things which every one of the 7 different ways of picking bacteria came up at the top of the list. And if we click here, we see we have 7 items of things to avoid, and it's a long list. Now we have how many items on this list? We have 1,700. That is overload, which is why I have these 2 buttons. To report for non-prescribing medical, which goes and downloads a file, which we can take a look at in a moment. But more importantly, we can take a look at specific things, because that file gives you a very short list designed to help people do it who don't want to get into all the technical details, and there are a lot of technical details. So let's take a look at a couple of items. First item is priority. Here is a estimator. Again, most people like having single numbers, so I've tried my best to have a reasonably meaningful estimator. And usually on the PDFs, I take half that value as a cutoff point to keep the number of items listed short. We don't want 1,700 items listed in it. That's overkill. And basically by going back and forth, I find that if it go for half the value, I get a reasonable half-page list of things to take and things to avoid, which for most people is more than enough information to saturate them out. So let's go in, and she has a bunch of questions. One of the questions she had is a question about Achaia. And we don't have anything in there, so it never made a list. So if she wants to take it, absolutely no problem. It has no known impact, positive or negative, so we can do. Another question she had was about milk, and we find that generally milk, cow milk, saturated milk fat, sort of things, generally milk sugar, all of these are there. Only one would have shown up on the PDF because of its value being high enough. All the other ones are minor excludes, and over here you can see the combination. Some cases you see 6 says exclude, 1 says take. It's pretty strong. Other cases it's 4 and 1, 2 and 0, 2 and 0, and even the milk thistle, the one quote milk that shows up, only one of the 7 ways of getting suggestions picked that show up. So it's a relatively low and weak one. So general suggestion is milk, cut off dairy as much as is practical. And let me think. Oh, let's take a look at buckwheat. Is a low minus, so it is impacts some of the bacteria in a negative way, some a little bit. So it is very mild. Again, we are talking a very low negative impact, which means if you feel like taking it, go ahead, do it. it is not going to be a major player. Major player is what we are interested in. Okay, that's, I think, basically it. So let's go back and just take a quick look at things without there. Let's take a look at diet style. Basically, high protein, high animal fat shows up twice the one. Low, so we have low fat starting up there, complex carbohydrates. Note we have low carbohydrate, but we also have high carbohydrates. One thing to understand is the terms comes from studies. That these are the terms that studies use, and sometimes they can be very close, but the study actually has significant differences, as in what went into low carbohydrate diet and what went into high complex carbohydrate diet, which leaves people having to struggle trying to figure out how to interpret it. So diet style I tend to not make great use of, because diet styles has too much waving on hand vaguity. So you're doing a Mediterranean diet. Are you talking about Greek Mediterranean or Spanish Mediterranean or Morocco Mediterranean? All of those are on the Mediterranean, or Italian. Each of those cuisine is different. You will not go and get the same type of thing if you go into a Spanish restaurant or a Greek restaurant. You get very different menus. So, and down on negative ones, we have, let's go to the next page. We have heavy animal based one, their Western diet, okay, their high beef diet, low protein. If we go back here, we have high protein, high animal protein. So in other words, I would tend towards going for the protein, but not the beef, which means probably fish and chicken. In terms of reconciling the two things, once I cut the beef, then once the high protein, and the compromise between two is going chicken and fish, or other things which are high in protein, which are not beef. Never an easy time interpreting the results, but as I said, I always try keeping strictly to what is in the literature, because I don't want to extrapolate incorrectly. And you may want to extrapolate, that's your choice, but the data is what the data is. Okay, then we have favorite there. These first two are the highest source of them in the food is grapefruit. Makes life nice and easy. Some of these are available as supplements, and generally, as I said, take to 200 level and above for the ones you should do. The ones below that, whatever, and always flip over and look at the ones to avoid. And again, 200 is a low mark, and so generally there's not much there. If you take some of them, don't worry too much about it. If there are other reasons to take them, for food, we have things like wheat bran, apple, almonds are to be avoided. Again, remember 200 is the bad thing, high resistance starch. Let's take a look at the positive thing. Flaxseed, linseed, caffeine. Caffeine. Yes, cure all. Coffee or tea. Okay, rare meat is a bit of an interesting one, since we are also trying to exclude beef. So again, there's a judgment call. We have contradictory studies in terms of simplicity, and you have to figure out there. All of these are at or below the 200 level, which is my usual cut-off point. We have refined wheat breads here. And let's take a look at wheat properly. And all we have to do is just type in wheat. And we have wheat bran, definitely to be there. Whole grain bread to be wheat. In general, wheat is negative. Refined wheat bread, probably because of other ingredients in it, may have come out moderately good. But as you see, the values are pretty low. It's not particularly outstanding, and it's below the 200 threshold that I usually use for a cutoff point. Herbs and spices. Cannabis, number 1, and everything else is sort of below there. And then a bunch of things which are to be avoided. Again, 200 is where I usually do my cutoff point, or correction, half of whatever the highest value, to be more correct. Highest value is 420, so that's about 200. Prebiotics, that's always a good one. Nothing made over 200 threshold, so basically you could try some of those things. You may want to avoid things in this particular, like inulin, there on that list. Notice that when you pick different things, different priorities done. So I've just finished doing revision for my original first draft. I've added a ton of stuff over just last weekend from new studies. So there's all this things shift back and forth. Sometimes they will flip because we don't have a huge volume of data on that. Let's take a look at, for example, inulin. Let's take a look here. And here we see what the impact of inulin, which ones it will increase, which one it will decrease, and we have the studies where the information is coming from. And we have how many studies? We have 15 studies there. So all the way down the right side, you have all the logic being used. And remember, we have a bunch of different bacteria being adjusted, and over here, bacteria by bacteria for the food you get listed. So it gives you the evidence trail for why things are doing. Probiotics, okay, some things to be avoided. Just one which is very commonly prescribed by many people as a cure-all is definitely to be avoided. And we only have one thing which is really sitting up in high, and that one is a particular mixture which I have being able to find a source of the pseudo Nutum, or however I care to pronounce it. Basically, can't find any product with it in it. If you do, please tell me. I would love to have it included, and everything else is low. So basically, don't bother with probiotics at the moment. Sugar, again, no particular one stands out. And polysorbate, which is to be avoided. Potato starch, those are things to be avoided, which usually is there, but generally it's not that great there. And then we have vitamins, vitamin E, a vitamin B complex, which is there. And then what do we have on the plus list? We have vitamin B7. So we're not talking about a general B complex. We're talking about specific B vitamins. The complex probably would not do as much good as the individuals. So we have vitamin B7, B9, B1, B2, and B12. So those individually are looking good, be there. And remember that we do have a feature which is very helpful, which is, where is it? Oh, sorry, I need to increase. Where is it? Yes, there it is. Supplement dosages is, you can go down here and look at something like B1, vitamin B12, vitamin B1. You can go here and you can see what studies was used, what amounts were used in studies. And whatever the highest value here, some MD in their research deemed to be a safe value. And my general suggestion is to try going for the highest value in dosages. Don't just jump to it immediately. Go in and do a quarter of that the first day for 2 days, then double it to half of it for 2 days, etc. Because sometimes people will react, either a die-off or some other thing. So that gives you a bit of information. So let's try doing a quick recap. we have the ability to get the canned suggestions done, nice and easy. We can go over and pick by conditions which we have. And there, and you see the number of matches, but also the percentile ranking. Some cases you have a high number of matches, but low percentile. Other cases you have a low number of matches and high percentile. It's just compared to everybody else. And then we have the health indicators, which if you have many, generally probably good to toss in. This came from some free, very nice study, 2 of which were just published this year. And they had a good size 8,000 people in 8,000 samples, probably 3,000 to 4,000 people who are deemed healthy, and another 5,000 people who are deemed sick. And they managed to identify which particular species are over or underrepresented in that population, and got a reasonably good predictor done from it with about 80% accuracy, which actually is pretty good given how varied people's health conditions can be. Okay, so at this point of time, I'm thinking I'm just about done. Oh, last thing. That sometimes shows up with 0 when it shouldn't. Okay, view basket consensus suggestions. There is, you may want to download both reports. And there we have one report. And now I do the other report. Okay, now I'm going to switch over and I'm going to actually open those reports and take a quick look through them. Let me get to the right spot. So what the report gives is first a list all of the bacteria which were flagged, and generally it can be, when you do the number of times we've done, we get a pretty good size. So some cases it's small, other cases it can be multiple pages like this one. The next page is basically going through the list and picking out the non-prescription items, which are roughly half of the items or above. And so my purpose was to give a relatively small list of items which should be taken. And you notice in the gray, we have the dosages. The dosages, again, come from those clinical studies where those dosages were used. These are simply suggestions. And as always, they should be reviewed by your MD before starting, because you have other conditions or other factors which some of them may not work well with. So, but there, again, short list, dosages to try making things easy. Again, the dosages are coming from clinical studies, so they are relatively safe. And we then have retail probiotics, which are what are called high safety factors. And by high safety factors, it means that this particular strain has no known impact shifting bacteria the wrong way for any of the bacteria. And remember, that's a huge list above. So these are the absolutely safe probiotics to take. Remember, we have actually no probiotics suggested. These are, if you wanted, these are the ones which are safe. However, you may find that they are a little bit of I recognize from the names, they may be a bit of a challenge to locate, probably not worth it for most people. Then we have the items which are at the bottom of the list, things to cut out. So you see things like pork explicitly called out. We have things like high resistance starch to be cut off. Don't see beef there. Again, these were selected by variety of things to try producing a short list, so they're not always there. but it gives you a list of the main things which are of concern to do. And then we go and we have the studies, some of the studies being used. Typically, there's somewhere between 200 to 400 studies used in most analysis. So this is just a sampling. Oh, in this case, we have, guess what? We use 1,000 different studies were referred to, and this is a sampling of them, just so that you get some idea what's going on. Okay, this is the natural path, the non-prescription one. Now let's take a look at the other one. The MD one basically kicks off with any drugs or prescription items which are there, and it doesn't give them rank order, it just gives them by alphabetical name. And generally the purpose of which, well, if you are really wanting to do it, you go back to the detailed list and find out which one has the highest priority, because that is one that has the highest probability of benefiting you. Here is just a list, and it's basically if the doctor, for example, for high blood pressure or for something, or high cholesterol has a preference, then to look for the list and see if there are any of the drugs that will do the job on the to take list. Sometimes you find for a particular condition like hypertension, one is on the to take list and one is on to the avoid list. It means that the doctor's concern is hypertension. Your concern is the microbiome. And if you can satisfy both people at the same time, then this one will help your microbiome and it will help your high cholesterol. That's the one we go for, because it probably would become a double blessing. So here's the list. The logic is, if you need to take something for a condition and there's alternative sitting there on this list, then do so. But you also want to go and take a look at the avoid list. And to my slight amusement, this person has not a single prescription items which is a high priority to avoid. If you go to the full list, you probably will find some there, but we don't have any high priority items. So that's, I think, just about it. So to recap, this just give me suggestions came out of people saying this is too confusing and this makes life easy for you. You can add in other things to add in your concerns to the cooking pot of factors to consider. Same sample, we just using different methods of saying which bacteria should we prioritize. And then we go over and we calculate things through, and then we go in and we can go in, finally showed up. We can go and see what the census is. This one gives us priority and the ability to filter, so you can have a good feeling as to what's going on. And if you have a question for something, like for example, cheese. Cottage cheese is a negative. Wait a minute. Remember I checked milk and milk was a negative? Cottage cheese is a negative. Hey, wait a minute. Cottage cheese is for milk. How about yogurt? Anything there? Yogurt, barely positive. And that's probably because of some of the bacteria in it. Kefir, another milk product, also negative. So dairy keeps coming up there. So the intent is to try to make it possible for you to build things out easily. And the thing I say that, just remember, these are suggestions. These are things which are calculated by mathematics and using PubMed studies as facts, which are the most probable items to help. Not guaranteed to help, just simply increase odds of helping. These are suggestions. That's all suggestions of how to say, hint or shift your microbiome towards a healthier state. Doesn't guarantee it will fix it, but generally my experience has been that it helps improves people's microbiomes. Some cases very majorly, other cases minorly, but it does do improve, which can be generally seen objectively by follow-up lab tests. which suggests about every 2 months, 2 to 3 months. After you started your suggestions, 2 months, and then do a retest to see if you have to do some course adjustment. And subjectively, as in reduce symptoms, sleep better, better mood, better stools, etc., which are subjective measurements. Okay, I think we are just about done. So, c'est ça pour le Power Performance.